All right, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining this virtual public meeting for the Union County Critical Intersection Program. Phase 2 of this program includes 5 intersections, and we've been hosting separate virtual public meetings for each intersection. Tonight's meeting is going to focus on the Poplin Road, Unionville-Indian Trail Road intersection in Monroe, and we're going to start with a brief presentation that'll take about 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for a question and answer session. But before we jump in, I just want to take a minute to introduce our panelists for tonight's meeting. My name is Jenny Noonkester with RSNH, and I'm a senior planner on the consulting team that's assisting the county with this project. And next, I'll introduce Bjorn with Union County.
Good evening. My name is Bjorn Hanson. I'm a transportation planner with Union County and oversee this program, which is only possible with the coordination and support of the municipalities and the North Carolina Department of Transportation. So I want to thank everyone for participating this evening.
Thank you, Bjorn. And next we have Sarah McAllister with the City of Monroe.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sarah McAllister, the Land Development Infrastructure Engineer.
And next is Stuart with NCDOT.
Good evening. I'm Stuart Basham with NCDOT's Division 10 office. I'm the Division Planning Engineer for Division 10. So I'm responsible for planning, prioritization, and funding of projects. We're working closely with Union County and with RSNH on this project. A lot of these intersections are located on our roadways and we're responsible for those. So this effort is of great interest to NCDOT.
And next we have Travis Pressler with NCDOT.
Yes, thank you. My name is Travis Pressler, and I'm the district engineer for Union and Anson counties. I deal primarily with permitting of accesses and encroachments and generally anything inside the NCDOT right-of-way. Thank you for having me.
And last we have Allison Drake with RSNH.
Hi, yes, I'm Allison Drake with RSNH, as Jenny said, and I am the consultant project manager for this Union County Critical Intersection Analysis Project.
If you can go to the next slide, please, Allison. So I'm going to take just a minute to talk through some of the logistics for the webinar. The meeting attendees won't be able to share any video or audio, so you'll need to submit any questions or comments that you have using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And you can type your questions at any point during the meeting and we'll answer them during the Q&A portion after the presentation. We're also recording this meeting and we'll be posting that on the project website for anyone that wasn't able to attend tonight. And lastly, I'll just remind our panelists to please mute their microphones when they're not speaking so we can minimize any background noise. Next slide, please. Here's an overview of tonight's presentation. We'll start with some background information about the Critical Intersection Program, show you the intersections that are included in phase 2 and talk about the steps in the study process. And then we'll switch over to the online website for the Poplin Road, Unionville-Indian Trail Road intersection, and we'll talk through the design concepts that are being considered and the next steps. After the presentation, we'll begin the Q&A session. And just remember that you can type your question at any point during the presentation and we'll get to those at the end. And with that, I'll hand it over to Bjorn to give us some background information on the Critical Intersection Program.
Thanks, Jenny. So looking at this slide, you can see that this is something that's been around for several years now. In 2014, Union County, in cooperation with the municipalities and DOT in the county, realized that we have a lot of inputs and requests to do something about traffic, safety, congestion, and just dealing with growth. But we need to focus our limited resources. We can't improve all the intersections at once. So we received funding through the Regional Transportation Planning Organization to conduct a study of what was identified as 54 intersections throughout the county, with 15 finalized as the recommendations to move forward on acquiring grant funds to improve to address safety and congestion. Over the next few years, over half of those intersections were actually funded for improvements. So our list of intersections was getting smaller. We needed to refresh that list. In 2019, we did that and identified 15 additional intersections. We focused on safety with congestion coming second. We focused on intersections that were not funded for improvements or otherwise were not built out so that we really couldn't deliver much benefit for the intersections. That meant that we didn't focus on Ray Road or Monroe Road or Providence. corridors that are funded for widening, because even though these are relatively small projects, they still take several years to deliver, and we didn't want to spend our limited funds on projects that would then get torn up within a couple of years due to an overall widening of the corridor. We received a second grant from the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization to develop designs and cost estimates for 6 intersections. That was done in 2019, 2020, with that work completed last summer. And then we received another grant to design another 5 of the intersections. That's where we are right now. We're working on alternate designs and cost estimates for the locations. We're going out to the public for feedback. And based on that feedback and deliberation by the towns, the county, and the DOT, we'll come up with our recommended design, and that work will be complete by this summer. And next slide. You can see on this map that the intersections are located throughout the county, and quite a few of them are inside municipalities, which is good because it increases the opportunities for partnerships. The ones in gray were conducted last year, and in fact, a couple of these intersections have actually been funded for improvements since that time. The ones in navy blue are the ones we're working on right now, and this community meeting is the last of 5 that we've held regarding these intersections that we're requesting public feedback on. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn it over to Allison, who's going to talk about the specific process that we go through to develop designs and alternatives for consideration as a part of this process.
Thank you, Bjorn. So in studying these intersections, Union County and its municipalities formed an advisory committee that in this case includes the city of Monroe. So based on the data gathered and the analysis results, 2 alternatives were developed for each intersection. So we're now in the public involvement stage where we're engaging the public for feedback through virtual meetings as well as the online survey. These recommendations will then be compiled into a report, which will be used to give Monroe and other municipalities a leg up to compete for funding for these projects. The final report will be posted on the Union County website upon completion if you'd like to review that. So we will now show the website that is publicly available to discuss the intersection in more detail. The Poplin and Unionville-Indian Trail Road intersection is located in Monroe and is currently 2-way stop controlled on the Poplin Road approaches. There's existing left turn lanes on all 4 legs and some sidewalk to accommodate pedestrians. However, there are not any crosswalks or other measures to bring driver awareness to pedestrians who must cross 3 lanes of traffic. So pedestrian safety and connectivity is critical as the intersection is surrounded on 3 sides by the Glendelock subdivision, and the neighborhood clubhouse is located south of the intersection. So a lot of people are crossing there. Review of the crash history in this location also showed vehicular safety concerns with fatal crashes occurring in both 2017 and both in 2020. So 2 alternatives were developed. Alternative 1 is a 4-way stop and alternative 2 is a roundabout. So alternative 1 adds stop signs on the Unionville-Indian Trail Road approaches, creating a 4-way stop condition. This alternative also rebuilds curb ramps and crosswalks to increase safety and connectivity for pedestrians. No additional turn lanes would be included, nor would a traffic signal, as traffic volumes do not justify signalization at this time. This alternative allows full access to remain to all properties surrounding the intersection. However, minimal right-of-way acquisition would be required. NCDOT has a standard process for this, but this is not happening at this time as the project is not yet funded. So this alternative reduces crashes by 70% and peak hour vehicle delays by 25 seconds, which are traffic delays during the busiest hour of the day. The approximate cost of this alternative is $220,000. Alternative 2 addresses safety concerns with a single lane roundabout. Reconstruction of curb ramps and the addition of crosswalks would be included to accommodate pedestrians, similar to alternative 1. Access to all the properties surrounding the intersection, just like alternative 1, is maintained. However, this alternative would require more right-of-way acquisition than alternative 1. This alternative potentially reduces crashes by 50% and peak hour vehicle delays by 7 seconds. The approximate cost of this alternative is $200,540,000. So if you want to come back to review this information later, you can click on these information circles that we have shown on the screen. And then there's also a feedback here at the bottom, or survey at the bottom of the page here, where you can provide feedback until April 2nd. So the next step for the critical intersection analysis is to evaluate the feedback received from the public involvement and then select a preferred alternative for each intersection. The design concepts will then be finalized and presented to their corresponding municipal boards, so in this case, Monroe, for approval. Finally, a study workbook and action plan will be completed for all the intersections, and as I mentioned before, that will be available on the Union County website. With the information provided by this workbook, the city and the county can consider potential funding sources and apply for funding. So I'll now pass it back to Jenny to conduct the Q&A portion of this meeting.
Thank you, Allison. I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen to type those in there. You can also search online for the Union County Critical Intersection Program, and you'll find a link to the project website where you can review the information that Allison was just walking through, as well as the information for the other 4 intersections. And we encourage you to go online and review the information and complete the survey to let us know which alternative you prefer by April 2nd. You can also submit any questions or comments through the online survey at the bottom of the website. So if you think of a question after this meeting, please go in there and submit it to us through the website. And we also have Bjorn's contact information on the screen, so you can feel free to reach out to him with any questions about this intersection or about the critical intersection program in general. At this time, I'm going to open up a brief poll. So if you would like to provide your preference for the design alternative, you can do that through the poll during this meeting as well. So I'll leave that open during the Q&A session. And I don't see any questions coming through on the Q&A box, so I'll just give one kind of general question to Bjorn to just tell us a little bit more about how the intersections were selected and about other ones in the county that have not shown up yet that people may be interested in seeing improvements.
Well, this intersection actually was not identified by local staff as a part of the previous process back in 2019. We had identified locations just off of our own knowledge, and then we went out to the public for feedback, both on the locations and what we should prioritize when we filter the projects down to figure out what's our top 15. And this intersection was actually identified by local residents quite a bit. And then when we ran the crash history for it, and were pretty startled by the number of crashes that were at this location, because if you just look at it, you think, oh, this is a pretty good intersection. It has crosswalks, it has sidewalks, it has turn lanes. You would think that it's a pretty safe location, but it's clearly not. And that's why it made it onto the list. So that's the process we went through in terms of identifying locations to evaluate, and then what we prioritized. We heard from the public that the number one thing we should be emphasizing is safety. So in terms of the aspects of an intersection that we looked at, there was the number of crashes, there was the crash rate relative to the traffic volume, there was the severity rate, meaning that how many serious injuries or fatalities had occurred. And this intersection scored fairly high in those metrics, so it was prioritized and through this process.
Great, and we've had a couple of questions come in while you were speaking, Bjorn, related to the safety. We had said, that alternative 1 would decrease accidents by 70%, and they're asking if the study looked at the number of cars that have rolled into the neighbors' yards. So I know that the crash data does include run off the road crashes, but Allison or Stuart, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the crash data.
Sure, I can talk about that a little bit. Yes, so we do look at a 5-year crash history, and we go through and look, just like as you said, Jenny, on what those crashes are. They could be run off the road or hitting another object, or what we saw a lot of was T-bones, where someone is pulling out, where there is the stop sign, excuse me, on Poplin, and then someone on Unionville-Indian Trail hitting them. So we did look into all those variety of crashes. This one is above the statewide crash average. So there is a higher amount of crashes here is basically what that means than the statewide average for an intersection would be, which is why our improvements are really focused on the safety. A four-way stop forces everybody to stop to help prevent some of those accidents. And then of course, a roundabout also provides a safer way for vehicles to turn at an intersection. So Stuart, I don't know if you have anything you want to add about crashes.
I think you've covered it pretty well, Allison. I will add that generally with roundabouts, you see a pretty significant reduction in crashes. Generally, not only crashes, but crash severity. And generally, with roundabouts, you can see about a 40% reduction in the number of crashes, but more importantly, crash severity, where with a standard intersection, the crash types are usually T-bones, head-ons, that sort of thing, and they occur at higher speeds, where with roundabouts, the circulating speed in a roundabout is generally 20 to 25 miles per hour, and the types of crashes that you have in and around a roundabout are much less severe, and they usually end up being side swipe type crashes that are much less severe and cause less injuries. So overall, they're safer in certainly a much lower number of crashes, but also decreases in crash severity as well.
Thank you. And I think the follow-up question that's come in was related to that, and I think we've already touched on answering that, but just noting that it's been an issue since 2007 that the stop signs really have not worked to stop the cars, and that the distance from the traffic signals is too great. So they wanted to just make sure that our study had looked into the safety concern of people running through the stop signs.
Right. And Jenny, I agree that we were kind of talking about that with the two options. And just to add to what Stuart was saying about how the roundabouts have generally less severe injury crashes. That's what that second percentage here in this comparison table, if you can see on my screen. So, alternative two being the roundabout. So the total crashes could be potentially reduced by 50%, but those injury crashes as much as 78%. So a big change there, just to add a little bit.
And then another question asking if the study took into consideration the increase in the number of new homes that have been built in the area in the last 2 years, that would increase the wait time if the stop signs are used. And Allison, I'll let you add on about the horizon year for the traffic analysis.
Right. So the way that we look at the traffic is we look at traffic counts. So for this study, we did have to do a little bit of uniqueness because we all know that during COVID, traffic patterns have not been the same. So we didn't do our traditional counts. We used what's something called streetlight data, which collects similar data, and then we look at it to make sure that it's accurate. And so that's looking at the current traffic. And then what we do is we, as an advisory committee, looked at the growth, the area, discussed it together, and came up with what we call the growth factor. And then we grow that traffic to what we call the horizon year. So that's the year that we're looking at the traffic that we're doing the designs on. So in our circumstance, we did that 10 years past when we were estimating these projects would be constructed. So that would be 2035. So really growing them about 14 years from now. So yes, those traffic amounts or counts were considered in there. And then when we're looking at alternatives, we did run traffic models to confirm that the alternatives that we're presenting, what the effects would have on traffic. And that's what you're seeing with these vehicle delays. Those are accounting for the traffic in that horizon year of 2035.
I would like to add to that just to get on this list in the first place, one of the considerations in addition to safety and congestion was growth trends. Was it a high, medium, or low predicted growth rate for the area? And this area was not low. I honestly don't have that number in front of me to know if it was a high or a medium, but it was recognized that this area was growing, and and the issue was going to get worse if we didn't get a project in here.
And you can see with these numbers here, the 25 seconds, and this is for alternative 1, and the 7 seconds for alternative 2. If the traffic is something that concerns you, that's one thing to think about between the two alternatives. Certainly a roundabout is going to have a little bit less backup with the traffic patterns that we're seeing than a 4-way stop. And logically, going from a 2-way stop to a 4-way stop may increase some of that traffic, but again, it was an alternative that we looked at due to safety concerns.
It's great we're getting the questions about safety, because that's certainly, in the responses we've gotten so far on the online survey, safety has definitely been, the top concern that we've seen coming through. And just to say a little more about the responses we've gotten so far, I think we have had 92 people that have responded to the survey online, and there was a predominant favor for the roundabout. There, about 88% of the people that have responded were preferring the roundabout alternative versus about 10% for the 4-way stop alternative. So safety has definitely been a concern. I think that is all the response or the comments that we've had coming through the Q&A box. I don't know if Bjorn or Sarah or Stuart have anything else that you'd like to add about this intersection.
I would just note
I think
that.
I'll add.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Bjorn.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it really is surprising at the amount of crashes there are at this location, because of the fact that it has a lot of those improvements you would expect to help out. The turn lanes, the relatively clear sight distance. I know there was some brush on the south side of Unionville-Indian Trail Road that has kind of blocked it in the past, but generally speaking, we just didn't see this being as bad as what it was. But having the public feedback really helped elevate the issue, and so we really do encourage public feedback. So if you haven't, if you can share this with your friends and colleagues or neighborhood homeowner association, that would be helpful, because we definitely want to make sure that we're getting the word out that we recognize that there are issues, and we want to hear about the real world implications of these, because as Monroe or Union County is considering alternatives to look at an intersection improvement versus a roundabout, it's a dramatic increase in cost. But if it's worth the money, then that's a good investment.
Sure. And I'll just add to that, I live a few miles from this intersection. I use it on a fairly regular basis. Initially, I wasn't aware of the safety concerns that existed at this intersection, but over time, as I've used it, I've seen several close calls myself in terms of near vehicular accidents. So I'm certainly much more aware of it, and the numbers certainly back that up. So this is a great location for some improvement, certainly, in safety.
Right. And as Bjorn mentioned, we're really encouraging the public input and feedback, and we'll have that survey open through the end of this week on April the 2nd. And after that, we'll take all the feedback we've received and do some presentations to the local municipal boards, and then we'll be putting those recommendations together in a final report. And as Allison mentioned in her presentation, that report will be available on the project website for review probably sometime around June. We'll have the final report ready with the recommendations. So if nobody has anything else, I think we are finished up with the questions for tonight, and we certainly appreciate everybody's participation, and thank you for joining us. And as I mentioned, this recording should be posted within the next day or two on the website if any of your neighbors or friends want to come back and take a look at it later. So thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Good night.
Thank you.